In the 11th century, the peoples and countries of the Eurasian continent were confronted by the overwhelming onslaught of the victorious Mongol army, which swept away everything in its path. No state in Asia, nor Rus, nor the Caucasus, nor Europe could withstand the might of the Mongol war machine. By the year 1227, the entire army numbered about 130,000 men. However, there could be no chronicle records of 400 Mongols arriving in Khwarezm, northern China, or Rus. Yet the Mongols almost always won. The harsh land, with no food, constant wars of everyone against everyone, hardened the Mongols and gave rise to Genghis Khan, the best among them. A land where survival, not life, was the goal, raised a nation of natural-born warriors. Mongols were trained to ride from a very young age. At 3 years old, a mother would place her child on a saddle and tie them to the horse's back. By the age of 4 or 5, the child would receive their first bow and from then on would spend most of their time in the saddle. Hunting served as a form of training, during which Mongols conducted what could be called military exercises. While on campaigns, they could sleep in the saddle, allowing for high-speed movement of their units. Mongol warriors were incredibly resilient. Marco Polo described how, in times of need, the Mongols could go 10 days without hot food. They fought on short, stocky horses that were extremely hardy and adapted to harsh climates. During campaigns, their thick fur protected them from the cold. These horses could cover great distances, graze while walking, and feed on roots and fallen leaves. In winter, they dug their own food from beneath the snow. Soldiers preferred to ride nursing mares, as they could drink their milk. In times of famine, they would cut a small vein in the horse's neck and drink some of its blood. Each warrior brought 2 to 5 horses with him, switching between them to always ride a fresh one. The army was organized using an Asian decimal system. The military was divided into tens, hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands, each commanded by a leader of the corresponding unit: 10-man commanders, 100-man commanders, 1,000-man commanders, and 10,000-man commanders. On campaign, the Mongols split their army into several large detachments to ease feeding and to maximize the plunder. During the time of Genghis Khan and his sons and heirs, the Mongol army consisted of 2 main types of troops: heavily armed and light cavalry. The proportion and weaponry of the army changed throughout the years of continuous warfare. As the Mongol Empire expanded, auxiliary infantry units and siege detachments were formed from subjugated peoples accustomed to fighting on foot. The Khan had his own military formation, a 10,000-strong personal guard corps called the Koshun. These guards were primarily recruited from the children of the nobility and from the strongest, bravest, and most skilled warriors, victors of military and athletic competitions. In rank, any Koshun member stood 1 level above a warrior or commander of the same rank in the field army. According to Genghis Khan's tradition, military positions and ranks were often inherited. However, commoners were also promoted for outstanding achievements and talents. The best Noyans were Genghis Khan's highest-ranking generals. In history, perhaps only among Napoleon's marshals or Stalin's generals were there as many brilliant commanders as in the Mongol army. Genghis Khan introduced a logistics service in the army. Commanders known as Cherbai or Kirby managed the supply of food, clothing, weapons, shelter, equipment, and the storage and distribution of looted goods. Genghis Khan enforced iron discipline in his army. Numerous offenses were punishable by death. The code of laws established by him demanded mutual assistance and support among soldiers. Every Mongol warrior was obliged to prepare thoroughly for a campaign. Punishment could follow even for lacking a needle or a spare bowstring, both vital in the field. Death was also the penalty for many other offenses, such as premature looting of the enemy camp or falling asleep on guard duty. The Mongols' main weapon was the composite bow, coated with a special lacquer borrowed from the Chinese. No bow in world history could rival the Mongol bow in effectiveness and in the skill of its users. Short, double-curved Mongol bows delivered an initial arrow speed of 300 meters per second and could pierce knightly armor. Every day of their lives, Mongols practiced archery, producing the best marksmen in the world. The skilled Mongol cavalry fired so rapidly that their arrow volleys became like showers. Each warrior carried several bows and quivers filled with various types of arrows. Each quiver contained up to 30 arrows. The light cavalryman was protected by an iron helmet and a leather armor coat called a katangu degel. This armor was often reinforced from the inside with riveted metal plates. The main weapon of the light cavalryman, like all Mongol cavalry, was the bow. They also used small light spears, flails, combat knives, and light axes. The heavily armed rider carried a saber, sword, or broadsword, a long spear with hooks for pulling enemies from the saddle, a battle axe, a metal lamellar armor known as a kuyag, an iron helmet, a dolga chainmail shirt, and a small round shield. Maces also saw widespread use. Helmets had a spheroconical shape and were equipped with nasal guards and half-masks. The wealthiest and most noble warriors also armored their horses. The armor was often lacquered and decorated with paintings. The strategic art of the Mongol army was based on well-organized reconnaissance, diplomatic maneuvering, and speed of movement. Scouts and spies were sent to the enemy camp immediately after planning for an upcoming campaign began. Numerous spies, often disguised as merchants, provided the Mongol command with intelligence on all the weak and vulnerable points in the enemy's defenses. They thoroughly informed the Mongols of the political situation in the region where fighting was to take place. The Mongols often sowed discord and conflict within enemy ranks, spreading rumors of their massive numbers, invincibility, and cruelty. They carefully chose the season for attacks. For example, the invasion of Rus was planned for the winter of 1237 to 1238, since frozen rivers made travel easier for the cavalry and served as excellent transport routes. Seeking total dominance over all conquered territories, the Mongols tried to eliminate enemy military forces and nobility, while also undermining the enemy's ability to reproduce military strength. They targeted craft centers, captured artisans, and sent them deep into the empire. They also conducted repeated devastations of enemy lands and imposed chronic dependence. The Mongol tactics were based on exhausting the enemy through maneuvering and attacks with light cavalry archers. Once the opponent was weakened and demoralized, a powerful strike by heavily armored cavalry followed, one that the enemy usually could not withstand. The Mongols skillfully employed feigned retreats to disrupt enemy formations if the first attacks failed, as well as ambushes. At the same time, they often allowed the enemy to withdraw, only to strike during the retreat. A widely used tactic was the carousel, in which Mongol archers would form a moving circular chain in front of the enemy and continuously rain arrows upon them. The Mongols only engaged in close combat once the enemy was weakened and their lines disorganized. After defeating the enemy, the Mongols launched an active pursuit of the retreating army, which could last several days. During battle, the guard usually remained in reserve, always ready to deliver the decisive blow or repel an enemy attack. Mongol commanders never took part in the fighting themselves, they stayed aside to control the course of the battle. A major advantage the Mongols had over other armies was their efficient system of coordination and command, which they continually practiced during large-scale hunts and military exercises. For communication, they used messengers, special drums and trumpets, white and black flags during the day, and lanterns at night. Initially, the Mongols struggled with storming fortified cities. To overcome this, they began recruiting Chinese and later Muslim siege engineers. As a result, the Mongols soon gained access to an extensive arsenal of siege equipment. They also introduced innovations in warfare, including the first use of primitive gunpowder artillery. In 1259, for instance, Chinese engineers created a fire lance made from bamboo, capable of shooting shrapnel up to 250 meters. Additionally, the Mongols widely used forced labor from numerous prisoners during city sieges. Each cavalryman was required to bring 10 captives. Under the supervision of engineers, these captives built and maintained siege engines and carried out siege work under enemy fire, such as filling and leveling moats. During assaults, the Mongols would drive prisoners ahead of them, using them as living shields. When besieging an enemy fortress, the Mongols did not pause their attacks even for a day, denying defenders any rest. Meanwhile, they divided their forces into units that would take turns during assaults. Nevertheless, whenever possible, the Mongols tried to lure the defenders into open battle using small detachments. Mongol warriors fought with intense ferocity, and they were especially ruthless toward those who resisted. The tactics of the Mongols were based on exhausting the enemy through maneuvering and continuous archery attacks from their light cavalry. Once the opponent was weakened and demoralized, the Mongols would launch a crushing assault with their heavily armored cavalry, which the enemy usually could not withstand. The Mongols effectively used feigned retreats to disrupt enemy formations if the opponent managed to endure the initial attacks, as well as ambushes. On the other hand, they often allowed the enemy to retreat, striking them precisely at the moment of withdrawal. A widely used tactic was the so-called carousel, where Mongol archers formed a moving circle in front of the enemy, showering them with a hail of arrows. The Mongols engaged in close combat only when the opponent was sufficiently weakened and their ranks were in disarray. After defeating the enemy, the Mongols organized an active pursuit of the broken army, which could last several days. During battles, the guard units usually remained in reserve, always ready to deliver a decisive attack or repel an enemy strike. The commanders never personally participated in the fighting. Instead, they stayed aside to oversee the course of the battle. One of the Mongols' greatest advantages over other armies was their well-established communication and command system, which they constantly honed during massive hunts and military maneuvers. For this purpose, they used messengers, special drums, and nakoras, white and black flags during the day, and lanterns at night. Initially, a significant drawback in Mongol tactics was their inability to capture fortified cities. To overcome this, the Mongols enlisted Chinese and later Muslim engineers, experts in siege warfare. As a result, the Mongols soon gained access to a rich arsenal of siege equipment. Moreover, they introduced innovations in warfare by being the first to use primitive fire artillery in 1259. Chinese engineers created a fire lance made from a bamboo tube that could fire grapeshot at a range of up to 250 meters. In addition, the Mongols made extensive use of the labor of numerous prisoners during city sieges. Each mounted warrior was required to bring 10 captives. Under the supervision of engineers, these captives built and operated siege machines and carried out siege works under enemy fire, such as filling and leveling moats. During assaults, the Mongols drove the prisoners ahead of them, using them as a living shield. When besieging an enemy fortress, the Mongols did not cease their attacks for a single day, depriving the defenders of any rest. Meanwhile, the Mongols divided their forces into separate detachments, which took turns during the assaults. Nevertheless, whenever possible, the Mongols sought to lure the defenders into open battle by using small units as bait. Mongol warriors fought with great ferocity, ruthlessly exterminating anyone who resisted. Friends, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to support the channel. Give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Your support helps the channel grow and allows us to create even more interesting and high-quality videos. Thank you for watching.